All right, so building a curriculum vitae. Um, sorry, whoops. So a CV or curriculum vitae or a vita should highlight your educational background, research, and teaching experiences. It's your opportunity to show other academics and researchers where you fit into the field at large, how you've contributed to other institutions, the work you're interested in and capable of doing as a scholar or a researcher. So CVs are most often used to apply for graduate programs and professional positions at institutions of higher education or research facilities. They're also used by almost all companies in the European Union. So if you're applying for jobs abroad, it's very likely that you'll be asked for a CV instead of a resume. So, but why not the resume? What are the differences? We'll start there. This is kind of the easiest question to answer and the one we get the most often. So a resume is really focused on your professional identity and your non-academic work history. So it highlights your work experiences and it's really compact or concise. Usually a resume isn't going to be longer than 1 or 2 pages, even if you've been working for a really long time. And it's always tailored specifically to the job or the company that you're applying to. And so the most detail that you give here falls under your skill sets and not necessarily under the education that you've had to get there. Whereas the CV shows your scholarly identity. It highlights your academic and research experiences. These are very comprehensive and there are no page limits. They can be as short as 1 to 2 pages and as long as, 15 or more pages because they are very detailed. They're cumulative, which means that they encompass your entire academic history and achievements, both in your coursework and in any professionalization or work experiences you have in a university or educational setting. They are applicable to most institutions of higher ed. So these can be broken down into sort of these specific parts. Just like any kind of writing we do, we want to take a look at what the genre that we're working within is and requires and is expected to do. And the genre here just happens to be a CV rather than a research paper. So no matter what, when you sit down to create your CV, this list on the left is what you should include. Your contact information, your education history, your teaching or research experience. So a lot of positions in higher ed aren't necessarily teaching focused. They are going to be research heavy as well. So both of those experiences are relevant. You also are going to list any honors, awards, fellowships, or grants that you've received, publications that you've written, presentations that you've made at professional conferences, professional affiliations. So if there's a group that's common among your profession that you are a part of that, either host conferences or discussions to keep you kind of up to date about that profession, those things go here. And then any service that you have performed for your university or your community. So things like volunteering in your broader community or working directly on a committee within your university. And then finally, references. So you see there are some similarities. If you're familiar with a resume, there are some similarities, but there are also a lot of things here that you won't see on a resume. Now, some other things that you might include if you have them or if they seem relevant to the program that you're applying for. These things are your research interests. So some of you might not have had the opportunity to conduct any real research through your program yet. And that's okay. You can tell a potential university what you would be interested in researching here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are an expert in that particular field of research, right? It just means that you're expressing an interest in this particular niche. You can also list relevant coursework that you've completed. So if your major didn't give you the opportunity to take a certain course, but you took it anyway, that applies to the program that you are now applying for, then it's okay to list relevant coursework here. It's also okay to highlight any specific courses that did apply toward your major or minor that you think will really make you stand out or were special and maybe different than what's typically offered. You can also list any computer, technical, or laboratory skills you might have. You could list and should list any language skills that you have. So beyond just being a good communicator, do you speak multiple languages? Do you know certain code for like a computer engineering type of code? Those things should be listed. And you can also list field work. So this is often either combined or replaces your research or teaching experiences. So for some things like archaeology or even some little corners of sociology and history, you might have had to go out and do some sort of hands-on research or even literal digging for artifacts. It is relevant to the field that you're applying to, so then you could include it either alongside your research or teaching experience or in place of. And then if you are in a performing arts, which I don't believe any of you are, but if you are in some sort of performing arts, your performances would then also be included in those relevant experience sections. Now, as a side note, I'm seeing a lot of people include photos in their CVs and resumes recently. And I'm not sure where the trend is coming from exactly, but I've heard different opinions about whether or not it's a good idea to do this. And what I will tell you, and this is explicitly my opinion, proceed with caution. If you choose to include a photo, it is highly unfortunate, but a reality that physical appearance opens you up to certain forms of discrimination. So if you want to avoid that entirely, then don't include a photo. But if you do want to include a photo or you think it's expected, then make sure that it's a professional headshot and not just a selfie or an irrelevant, landscape or activity. You might consider contacting our campus photographer to see if they might be willing to take a professional headshot for you. I know that there are units like the Career Center that do occasionally organize that and will do sort of an open call. So you might look into that if you don't have one, but would like to include this on your CV or resume. Now, how does this thing look, right? How do we sort of format the CV? We know that all genres of writing have a certain expectation for what they should physically look like. So to start, all CVs and resumes just sort of come with a wide variety of physical appearance. And most of you have access to like a word processor or, some other online app that offers a sort of huge long list of templates that you could choose from and then just plug your information in. And most of them, while they're very pretty and eye-catching, those sort of overly extravagant templates are not necessary. This is kind of another trend that I see a lot lately, is folks choosing really colorful or sort of vibrant CVs. And I'm not here to tell you to kind of squash your personality and not show that off, but I will tell you that it's not necessary to have a very sort of artistic or overly decorative layout or template. That really the folks reading these things are not looking for your creativity in what your CV looks like necessarily. They're looking for the relevant information they need to tell if you'll be a good fit for that program or that position. So use a template, sure, but maybe try to limit your choices down to ones that still look very straightforward and clean. But beyond that, each section needs to have a clear, bold heading. It does not need to be 10 times larger than the rest of the font on your page. You do kind of want to be consistent in your font sizing, or maybe only go a size or two larger than the rest of your text, but make sure that it's clear and that someone can easily and quickly take a glance and know when they're moving from one section of your CV to another. Any of those sections where dates are included should be listed in reverse chronological order. So meaning the most recent or ongoing activity needs to be listed first, and then you work your way backward in time. So if you were just working on your education section, you would say the first thing that shows up would either be your master's or your PhD, then your undergraduate work, and then, you know, any other high school and beyond. Really, though, once you've reached a certain level in your career, your collegiate history is really what folks are focusing on. So next is service organizations, university committees, and professional memberships are simply lists. They don't necessarily need any details below them unless it's something that is very unusual that you feel like would benefit from a descriptive sort of insert beneath it. Otherwise, just list the names of those organizations or committees and move on. So throughout this presentation, I've linked a few resources, and I am going to share this with you all so that you can actually click on these things. But anywhere you see blue underlined text, it means that this is a resource that you can grab either for more information, or this one in particular is a detailed checklist that you can go through when you're creating your CV. The publications, presentations, and grants sections should appear as bibliographic lists. APA style is used most often, even if that's not the style that's typical in your coursework. APA just tends to be the most popular citation style used in CVs across institutions. Always defer that, though, back to a trusted academic advisor or a mentor who is kind of helping you get into the profession, transition from being a student to a professional. But that's just sort of a commonality that we've noticed. But again, a bibliographic list. So it should appear exactly as if you were writing a bibliography for your research paper. So see, those skills of citation apply elsewhere, right? And so this is just a visual example of that. And again, we do have dates, which this one is a bit out of order and needs to be restructured. No, it doesn't. Never mind. Sorry. So we do have dates here, right, of when these things were presented. So you can see that they are reverse chronological, going from the most recent to the oldest. But I've also got them laid out just like an APA style bibliographic citation. So I've got my title, I've got the place where or sort of the institution or the institution or the conference where that presentation was given, and then who was responsible for that conference, where it occurred, the year or academic term when it was presented, and then here I'm including a marker of whether it was presented, so that kind of puts the period on that sentence, right? It tells my reader that this thing is done. But you'll notice here in 2020 that I just have an accepted. That's because, as we all know, in 2020, lots of things are canceled. So I still wanted this on my CV because I wanted to show folks in my field that, hey, I was accepted to this particular conference. I just didn't get to go because it was canceled. So my field knows I've done this work and that I had a presentation worthy of being accepted and viewed by my peers. It just simply didn't come to fruition. So this is why those markers are there, but they may not always be relevant for your work or your field, and that's okay. But so here you'll notice that there is not a sort of description after these, because it's not really necessary. Typically, these are listed in a record somewhere that someone might be able to find and get a summary of, or they'll ask you about it if they want to know more. And as you are in the field a long time, this list becomes very long, and you don't need to necessarily need all those extra details beneath it. So beyond that, your research projects, relevant teaching and work experiences or research experiences should include bulleted lists of responsibilities, activities, initiatives, and other relevant information that may help your work stand out. So for instructors, it might be that you are teaching a pretty common class, but if you've taught that class in a new way, say you've given it a theme or you introduced a field of a certain approach to that class that isn't typical, this is an opportunity to sort of highlight those things. So it's still listed in reverse chronological order, or the most ongoing project, and then a description of who you worked for or what unit you worked for, who your supervisor was, and then the governing body or the governing university under which that department falls. Oops, sorry. And then just brief description. So here you want to include enough details that your reader can kind of pick up that you put effort in and that you didn't, that you know what you were doing and you're trying to highlight that for them, but not so much that you're just taking up lines and lines and lines of space. So do still be concise while also giving enough detail to give your reader an understanding of what you did in that role. Especially for those of you who might be working as graduate assistants. Working as a GA looks very different across all departments. So including that descriptor helps someone reading your CV to know exactly the nature of your work and whether or not that might be relevant experience for whatever it is you're applying for now. Your layouts might differ across professions. So if you're applying to either a position or a program, a higher ed program for a liberal arts college, you're typically going to be very teaching focused, and they're going to highlight your teaching and tutoring experiences first in your CV. But if you're going to a more research intensive university or program, you're going to want to list your publications or your fieldwork first and highlight your research history and interests before listing any teaching experience. So this is where you can sort of tailor this to the particular program or job you're applying for, by literally changing the order in which you present information. If you're super early in your career, like many of you likely are, these are going to help you to determine the order in which you display different sections of your CV. So while you don't want to pad your document with irrelevant or misleading information, you do want to show that you're an active participant in educational and professional opportunities. So it's okay if your CV isn't 10 pages long right now. You're still a student. And again, most of you probably haven't had that extensive academic work history that you might see on a CV for, say, Dr. Benson. So it's okay, right, that you don't have this long running document, but you do want to make sure you're including everything you've accomplished up to this point that is relevant to your field. I've also included another sample here from the University of Illinois that you can take a look at. It includes a guide and sort of some notes throughout that document that you can check out and compare what your work looks like to theirs. But that's really the sort of long and short of it. The difference between a resume and a CV is pretty stark, right? Again, the resume is going to be really short, to the point, and the only details you're really giving are focused on the skills that you've obtained, right? Those really hard, measurable, easily identifiable skills. Whereas a CV really wants to highlight not only your skills, but everything that you did to develop those skills, right? So again, you're trying to show that you either have an interest in or experience with these research or academic programs. Now, I do have an activity for you all, but I'll pause here for a minute for questions. Does anyone have any questions about what we just covered? All right, if you're typing a question, feel free to keep doing that and plug it in when you're ready. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So I'd like you to take 2 to 3 minutes. So I am going to ask you to work a little bit today. So I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and I want you to list all of your professional or academic goals. So some questions to consider are, do you prefer to be primarily a researcher, a teacher, or an administrator, or some combination of the three? And then at what kind of institution do you want to work? So when you finish this program, I'm asking, are you going to continue on into another degree, or are you going on to the job market? And what does that job market look like ideally? So I'm setting a timer now for 2 minutes. And I want you to actually do this. This is for you, by the way. I'm not going to ask you to turn it in. Okay, that was 2 minutes. Don't worry if you had more things to jot down. You have plenty of time to get that done. But based on your responses, you can take that list and determine an outline for your CV. So in what order will you display your accomplishments and experiences based on these professional and academic goals that you've just written down? Now, if you've already got a CV, that's wonderful. But this can also help you to reorganize and restructure that to better suit the work that you really want to be doing. And right now, while you're still in a program, is a great time to be dreaming about that and situating your materials to align for a better shot at getting a position that you really want. So if you didn't take those 2 minutes to write this list, I really encourage you to do that on your own time, because this isn't an assignment for your class, right? This is you and your future. So this is really important, I think, first step to take if you haven't already polished or created those materials at all. So your next step If this is your first time writing out your CV, then use the outline you created today to start listing relevant experiences under each category. So I have a really bad habit of not updating my CV on a regular basis, even though I'm constantly telling the grad students who work with me to do that. I don't take my own advice. So then I'm scrambling to kind of get everything situated once a year and re-detailed to send back to the university to update my materials for them. But my best advice is, once you've curated this thing, to make it a habit to go ahead and at least plug in the title of what you've accomplished into the relevant section so you can go back later and detail that out appropriately. But again, if this is your first time, use your outline and list your relevant experiences under each of the headings that we talked about today. And also, go ahead and start talking to faculty and mentors and ask if they'd be willing to be listed as references on your materials. So it's never too early to ask someone to be a reference for you on your, I call it here a static reference. So that means that's someone whose name and contact information you can list at the end of your CV, who you know is always going to speak positively about you should a university or whoever is interviewing you want to contact someone about your background. It's never too soon to secure those folks and to start asking for letters of recommendation when you know that you're applying to a certain program. Another bit of advice is simply don't ever list someone as a reference without speaking to them first. You want to ensure that not only are they going to give you a positive reference, but that they're willing to do that for you at a given time. So it does take a bit of thought and time to write a solid letter of reference or a letter of recommendation. So you want to make sure that that person is willing and able before you list them on your materials. But again, it's never too late to start forming those connections and asking folks who you've worked significantly with. You don't want to go back as a graduate student and ask your third grade art teacher for a reference, right? You want to make sure that these are people who are respected in your profession and know you well enough as a student or as a researcher or as an assistant to give relevant information on your history. Now, if you've already got a resume but don't have a CV, it's actually really easy to build from that. So what you're going to do is take a look at the resume you already have, use the outline you created today, and start rearranging your relevant history. But eliminate experiences that do not apply to your academic pursuits. Now, remember a few moments ago now, we listed all of the things that a CV has versus what a resume has. And if you'll remember, a resume typically is going to just have a list of your skill set kind of early on, usually at the very beginning. Whereas your CV actually details your accomplishments so that your reader can discern what your skills are and how you got them. So you are going to, once you've rearranged those relevant histories and experiences, you will need to expand on them in the way that the CV sort of expects you to do. But remember that relevant experiences will mean different things for different programs. So leading your basketball team to a state championship will not help you secure a job as a research assistant in a history program, but it might actually help you in a physical education field, right? So think about those things that you may have listed already on a resume and reevaluate whether that's really the picture you want to paint for a stranger in an academic or professional setting that you're asking to either hire or admit you. And most importantly, make use of your available resources. So the A-State Career Center does a lot of work to help students refine application materials. They are typically resume focused, but I think that they have a CV that they have CV experiences and materials as well. So contact them. They're really easy to make an appointment with. But you've also got the A-State Writing Center, and we're here for all things writing. So as I told you all before, we're happy to work with you on anything that you're writing, even if it's not for a class, and that extends to your CV. So come see us. I've also got a list of the works referenced throughout this presentation with links to those materials, or most of those materials here. So feel free. I've plugged the link to this presentation in our chat. So feel free to explore everything there, refer back to this as you need to, but always feel free to contact us and book an appointment with the center when you're ready.